Okay, good morning. My name is Jim Bivens. I'm the Chief Administrative Hearing Officer for the Department of Health and Human Services. I'm conducting this hearing today. This hearing is a hearing for reconsideration of Lincoln County Health Care. I'll refer to them as Lincoln County probably most of the time. Application for CON, and they have asked the Commissioner for a reconsideration of one of the conditions on her approval. I'll read the notice into the record. If you saw the newspaper, you've seen what I'm about to read into the record, but this makes it very clear what we're here for. And while I want to give everyone that wishes to speak the opportunity to, I'm going to try to keep you focused on this condition only. The overall global issues about whether the certificate of need should have been approved or not are not on the table anymore. It's just about this condition number 3, which I'll read into the record. There are attorneys here for Lincoln County Health, and there is an attorney here representing what I refer to as the foundation, which is Booth Bay Health and Wellness Foundation. At some point, we'll let the attorneys announce their appearances for the record. As you can see, we have a court reporter taking down all of the testimony and me. I also have my recorder going. My recorder, assuming it doesn't fail, is the official record, meaning the recording of what goes on here. I also will take in documents, and when we're all said and done, I package it up. I make no recommendations to the Commissioner. I'm just here to run this hearing and give everyone a chance to speak and take written testimony. If you don't wish to talk, that's fine, and send it all to the Commissioner. The attorneys will have till the end of business this Friday to submit closing written arguments to the Commissioner. There was some question about if some member of the public wasn't able to be here today, or we get to a natural end time and no one else wants to speak and we're all done leaving, and then someone wandering in before 5 o'clock, would they have an opportunity to submit something in writing for the Commissioner? I am going to allow that up to the close of business on Friday. If you know someone in that situation, they need to send their written testimony to me. I will make sure you know what that address is. It will be addressed to the Commissioner, but comes to me. And it will be included in the record that goes to the Commissioner. The witnesses will be sworn under oath as was required by the rules that we're operating under. Members of the public, you will not be sworn. You're making statements. You're not necessarily witnesses as far as I'm concerned. The sign-in sheet is up front. If you come to testify, make sure you print your name clearly, and if you wish, put whether you're for or against the condition remaining, or none of the above. Let me have the attorneys identify themselves for the record, starting over here on my left.
Gerald F. Petroselli for Lincoln County Health, Petroselli, Martin, and Haddo in Portland.
Thank you.
Linda Yarmish, it's my privilege to represent the Booth Bay Region Health and Wellness Foundation.
There was at some point prior to today a motion to intervene, it's called, by the foundation, so that they could have party status, if you will, and sit at this table. After the motions and arguments for and against, I ruled that they would be an intervener, so that's why they're here. The procedure will be that Lincoln County Healthcare will begin with an opening statement, and then they will be allowed to put on their presentation for the Commissioner with witnesses and any additional documents that haven't been filed with me already. Everything is subject to objection. Before we get to that part, the attorneys want to go on the record with various objections and motions which is their right, and this is a record we're creating for not only the commissioner, but perhaps a court later on. And so I'm allowing them to make their objections for the record. I'm not going to make any rulings on their objections, except forward it with the record to the commissioner with a recommendation to the commissioner in my cover letter that these objections be addressed in her final decision. As each witness testifies on behalf of Lincoln County Healthcare, I will allow the Foundation's attorney to ask any questions of the witness they might have, and I will also allow limited rebuttal if there's any need for it from Lincoln County Health. At some point, I'll determine that witness is done, and then they put on their next witness. And I believe some of them will be referring to, they're going to use the easel and referring to documents, etc., which is fine. And then the Foundation does the same thing. They'll put on their witnesses, they'll get to be cross-examined, some rebuttal, also an opening statement. And of course the public. Now, we are okay to be in this room till 5 o'clock. This hearing will end by 5 o'clock or until the last witness is testified or spoken. We'll wait around a few minutes after that in case someone's running late, but the notice did not have had a start time but did not have an end time. So I'm not going to make these folks or myself sit here till 5 o'clock waiting for someone that might show up at 4:59. So if you know anybody that wants to testify and it can't get here until late in the afternoon, you might want to at some point give them a call and say you probably should get here and not wait till close to 5 o'clock. We might be here naturally till 5 o'clock. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I'm going to, I hate to limit the time I put on the public, but the parties actually have the more leeway than you do, let's put it that way, because what they're representing, and this is an important issue for both of them, and I'm going to give them a lot of time, more than you're going to get. We'll start off with, I'm going to say 3 minutes each for the public, and we'll see how that goes. I won't sit here with my watch watching the minutes tick by and then stop you. I'll try to be nice, but we really want to give everyone a chance that wants to testify. So I'm going to have to, let's say, start with 3 minute limit. The parties will have a chance when we're all done, all the public's done testifying or speaking, to give oral closing arguments if they wish, but as I said before, they will have the opportunity to submit written closing arguments. So they might want to sum up at the end, and that's fine. The commissioner has 60 days from today to issue her final decision, unless the parties all agree that they would give her more time than that. Up to this point, no one's mentioned giving her more than 60, so we'll stick with the rules. So let me read the notice into the record. Lincoln County Healthcare acquisition and control of Miles Memorial Hospital, St. Andrews Hospital, and Cove's Edge, and subsequent acquisition of control of Miles Memorial Hospital by Lincoln Health. The following notice is provided in accordance with the Maine Certificate of Need Act and the Maine Administrative Procedure Act. The Commissioner of the Department of Health and Human Services has scheduled a reconsideration hearing on the referenced CON application for August 11, 2014 at the Booth Bay Harbor Town Office, 11 Howard Street, Booth Bay Harbor, Maine, beginning at 10 a.m. in the Municipal Meeting Room. The hearing will be conducted by the Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Administrative Hearings. The general purpose of the hearing is to allow the CON applicant, interested parties, and the public to have an opportunity to comment on the following topic related to Lincoln County Healthcare's CON application to acquire control of Miles Memorial Hospital, St. Andrews Hospital, and Cove's Edge, and the subsequent acquisition of control of Miles Memorial Hospital by Lincoln Health. The reconsideration of condition number 3 of the Commissioner's decision dated May 27, 2014, which states, the applicant will provide an urgent care service in the Booth Bay community beginning within 3 months of approval of this application. This urgent care service must be staffed and available 24 hours daily, 7 days a week, for a period of no less than A, 3 years, or B, 2 years, if the then certificate holder has demonstrated that utilization has been less than adequate to offset marginal operating costs, less $500,000 for the prior 12 months, or C, 18 months if the then certificate holder has demonstrated that utilization has been less than adequate to offset marginal operating costs, less $1 million for the prior 12 months. Review of this consideration, if requested, before 3 years will include public notice and a reduced 5-day comment period. Approval of a change in operating hours would occur no less than 60 days after expiration of the timeframes considered above. That's condition 3, all of that. The applicant claims a single basis for reconsideration of the third condition regarding the operating hours of its urgent care center. The applicant states that there is significant relevant information not previously considered by the department regarding urgent care demand and revenue and expenses of the urgent care center. The scope of the hearing shall be limited to reconsideration of the condition based on new information not previously considered by the department regarding urgent care demand and revenue and expenses of the urgent care center. Such hearing shall be held in accordance with Title V, Chapter 375, Subchapter 4 of the Administrative Procedure Act. The Chief Administrative Hearing Officer will not be making a recommendation to the Commissioner. The Chief Administrative Hearing Officer's role will be to allow the applicant, interested parties, and the public to have an opportunity to present evidence and arguments and to create a suitable record for prompt submission to the Commissioner for consideration in rendering a decision. James Bivens, Chief Administrative Hearing Officer, DHHS, Division of Administrative Hearings, 11 State House Station, 35 Anthony Avenue, Augusta, Maine, 04333. All right. That sets the ground rules for why we're here. So let's get started. Now, we'll start with the objections and motions for the record. I'll start with Mr. Petroselli, and then we'll go over here to the foundation.
Thank you, Mr. Bivens. I understand based on our conversations that we will argue these motions in our written submissions, and my point here is not to speak to them at length, but to make certain that at the beginning they have gotten into the record. Obviously, if you think something more is needed. Speak up. I'll do my best. If the chair thinks that something more is needed than what I'm about to say, I will appreciate the chair's guidance. We object and move to strike the testimony of the 3 witnesses because, in part or in whole, they address emergency department needs, which is, as you have just said, not part of what this hearing is about, and therefore the testimony is on its face immaterial and irrelevant. One of the witnesses undertakes to restaff the urgent care center, which is not within his scope and not within the commissioner's scope, indeed. There is no record foundation for the basis for any of the numbers that have been submitted in these various recalculations, and as an elemental matter of evidence, witness cannot just make up numbers and put them into evidence and expect decisions to be based upon them. The testimony of Dr. Oliphant is essentially anecdotal, and anecdotes are not evidence of volume or revenue or cost, which are the kinds of evidence that would be necessary for the commissioner to decline to remove condition number 3. With respect to the members of the public, we are always interested in the views of the members of the public, and I do not expect them to not speak. It is essential, I think, in a matter of good order, that what they say is argument, not evidence, because they will not be sworn, they will not be cross-examined, and their capacity to give evidence on technical or financial matters will not have been established as a matter of record. And to the extent that they want to supplement the argument, it is moreover arguably redundant in that the foundation is here to speak for the public, and I'm guessing that there are not many members of the public who have views different from those of the foundation. And so we will elaborate further on those, particularly the more technical matters of evidence law, in our written submission.
Thank you.
Our response to that would be that the commissioner specifically calls for appropriate urgent care services, and it's our position through our witnesses that those services can be provided through several different models. You know, one of those models does happen to include reopening the emergency room, and I just think it's important to note that that's not the only one. The fact is that Maine Health is asking that the urgent care be staffed with emergency doctors, so I don't feel like it's that far of a stretch. I think it's important that the community be heard on this issue, and again, it's appropriate urgent care presence doesn't say how it has to be provided. I think we're well within the commissioner's condition 3.
Anything else?
Take care of it right.
Yep, thank you. Okay.
But I have an objection
Yes.
as far as the pre-filed testimony for Maine Health, Lincoln Health. There is an issue raised that is not in the scope of condition 3, and that is the question of additional beds. I think they should be stopped from even raising that issue, not only because it's not in the scope of condition 3, it's a subject for another hearing on another day, but also because the reason there are fewer beds is because of the actions they have taken. They should be stopped from raising that issue. What they're trying to do is take it away, offer it as a carrot to take something else away. It's a separate issue. We shouldn't be clouding that here today.
And we will respond in detail in writing. The basic point here, of course, is that a dollar cannot be spent twice, and that the requirement that money be lost in large volume at one location strains any institution's capacity to provide other more needed or more useful services in another way, and to contextualize the losses, the basic numerical losses, one needs to have in mind, as a matter of good health planning for the community, what the better, more appropriate uses for that same money might be. We think it's entirely in order to make the point, and we will make it in writing, and the commissioner can decide.
My response to that would be there's not going to be any evidence about other losses. There could very well be other departments that have losses too, and I think the most important point is you're not making any guarantee that if once those beds are established, they're going to be there forever, or that they're even going to be established. That's a carrot. It's not a guarantee.
Okay, well, I'll let you all go into further detail in your written closing arguments. I think you've made your points. Once again, I will not be ruling on these arguments. The commissioner will hear them, maybe read them, and I will recommend to her that she address them when she does her final decision. Thank you. All right, Lincoln County Health. Call your first witness, please. Oh, you want an opening, that's right.
Thank you. Again, I'll try to be brief because there has been a lot submitted, but to provide some basic context for what we're about to do here. As you know, Mr. Bivens, Lincoln Health has challenged the idea that certificate of need process has anything to do with any of this, but here we are in a certificate of need proceeding. And if we are in a certificate of need proceeding, then we need to do it in accordance with the certificate of need law. And these issues need to be addressed and considered with respect to the criteria set forth in the statute, assuming, arguendo, that the commissioner has any jurisdictional authority to do certificate of need work here at all, then she will need to do it in accordance with that law. And I'm particularly talking about these conditions in section, I think it's 335, but there are a lot of pages here, in which the subpart 7, excuse me while I get that right, 335, subpart 7, C and D, There has to be demonstrated public need for the proposed service. It has to be demonstrated that the proposed service substantially addresses specific health problems. It needs to be demonstrated that the proposed service will have a positive impact on the health status indicators of the population to be served. It has to be demonstrated that there will be demonstrable improvements in quality and outcome measures applicable to the services. The proposed services need to be consistent with the orderly and economic development of health facilities, which is the point I was making about the development of skilled beds or other resources, and the impact of the project on total health care expenditures after taking into account, to the extent practical, both the costs and benefits of the project and the competing demands in the local service area. All of this has to be taken into account by the commissioner, and as I think everybody knows, there are many communities in Maine of similar or larger size with not different or less in the way of access to these kinds of services. And so our basic point here is that if this is going to be done as a certificate of need process, we have come prepared to provide the kinds of information that are required in order to do a certificate of need analysis, and we hope that the commissioner will see the evidence in light of the statutory norms.
As long as that evidence is directly related to condition number 3. The CON hearing has already been held. The commissioner's issued her decision with condition number 3 being the only issue we're here about. I understand what you're talking about, but we'll see how it goes. But if there's any straying from condition number 3, I'm going to step in. Okay. So, call your first witness. I'll swear that person in.
I could make some opening remarks as well.
Oh, you can do it now, or you can do it when it's the foundation's turn, whichever
Okay,
you prefer.
We'll wait. there.
Okay.
James Donovan, please.
Mr. Donovan, if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth about the matter pending before me to the best of your ability and belief?
I do. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, what we're going to do is just read this script, the pre-filed testimony verbatim. That is what you expect us to do.
If you wish, just for your benefit, I ordered that testimony be pre-filed to speed things up. However, it was brought to my attention this morning that maybe members of the public would like to hear what that testimony is, because you won't, otherwise you won't know, because it's in writing. So I have granted the request to have the witnesses, if they wish, read in their pre-filed testimony. It won't save us time, but I think you should hear it so everything is in context.
And so, Mr. Donovan, I'll read these questions. If you'll just read the answers as they were pre-filed without deviating from the script, then we can get on with the cross. Please state your name and title.
My name is Jim Donovan. I'm the president and CEO of Lincoln County Healthcare. I have served as CEO since 2008.
What is the purpose of your testimony here today?
I am providing information about the impact of compliance with condition number 3 in the Commissioner's May 27, 2014 letter granting CON approval. Condition number 3 requires that Lincoln Health operate its urgent care center on the St. Andrews campus on a 24-hour basis. As set forth in the CON application, Lincoln Health currently operates the urgent care center on an 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. basis. My testimony addresses the criteria specified in the CON statute as it relates to condition number 3, whether the 24-hour operation of the urgent care center is economically feasible and consistent with the orderly and economic development of health facilities and health resources for the state.
Has the CON applicant previously had an opportunity to provide evidence and information regarding condition number 3 and its impact?
No. Prior to releasing its preliminary analysis, the DLRS staff conferred with Lincoln County Healthcare as required by the CON statute. No mention was made by staff of a proposed condition that the urgent care center be operated on a 24-hour-a-day basis. Thereafter, the DLRS staff issued its preliminary analysis of March 14, 2014. There were two conditions set forth in the staff's preliminary analysis at page 61, and neither refers to the urgent care center or its hours of operation. Condition number 3 first appeared in the Commissioner's May 27, 2014 decision. We sought reconsideration of condition number 3 in a request filed with DHHS on June 27, 2014. As explained in that request, Lincoln County Healthcare seeks relief from that condition number 3 and sought this hearing to provide information demonstrating that adverse consequences will occur if condition number 3 had to be met.
Speaking as the Chief Executive Officer of the institution that would be required to comply with condition number 3 for up to 3 years if the condition is not removed, would you please summarize for us what would be the likely consequences in terms of efficacy, cost, and efficiency to Lincoln Health?
Yes, the impact of the condition number 3 requirement to double the urgent care hours of operation will result in an unneeded, low-volume service that is not clinically appropriate. A service that will increase the cost of care for the residents of Lincoln County, and a service that will force Lincoln Health to incur substantially increased annual operating losses for its urgent care center.
Has Lincoln County Healthcare estimated the likely incremental losses that urgent care center will sustain by expanding the hours of operation to comply with condition number 3?
Yes, we've prepared 2 estimates of the operating losses based upon best case and likely case scenarios. Under the best case scenario, where the term best is defined as losing the least amount of money, the additional 12 hours of operating time means the urgent care center will sustain additional losses of nearly $675,000 per year. In a likely case scenario, where the term likely is defined as the expected activity, the losses are $733,000 per year. This for a service that does not appear to be a cognizable need in a certificate of need sense, which would justify either of these levels of additional expense.
Can you provide detail for your conclusion that there does not appear to be a cognizable need for such expanded operation?
Yes, the most reliable indication of need, actually lack of cognizable need, is the record of emergency department visits at St. Andrew's Hospital prior to the transition of the emergency department on October 1st, 2013. Applicants' LCHC Exhibits 1A and 1B, summarized below, presents information on projected urgent care visits by time of day based upon St. Andrew's Hospital Emergency Department's actual 2013 experience. Based upon this volume, Exhibits 1A and 1B present pro forma net revenue, expenses, and operating losses on the rates that Lincoln Health expects to be able to charge for the services to be provided. This information is presented for the 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. hours for the urgent care center proposed by Lincoln Health, the 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. extended hours required by the department's condition, and the combined operation. Exhibit 1A assumes 0 growth of visits between the hours of 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. over the 2013 fiscal year baseline, actual emergency visits not arriving by ambulance. Exhibit 1B assumes a 36% growth. In either scenario, the average cost to treat a patient during the initial 12 hours of operation is striking. In the best case scenario, Exhibit 1B, the average cost to treat a patient balloons from $346, the cost to treat during the hours of 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., to $1,487, the cost to treat between the hours of 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. In the likely scenario, the cost to treat a patient between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. is over $2,000. Either scenario, compared in Exhibit 1C, portends a significant financial burden for the additional 12 hours of operation.
Let me stop here. There are 2 exhibits, those are 1A and 1B, are on the easel, and 1C is here somewhere behind that. They're in the record already as pre-filed exhibits on 8.5 by 11 sheets. If I may just represent that the bottom lines here show losses of the magnitude described in the testimony, and we won't read all these numbers if that's agreeable, Mr. Chairman.
That's fine.
Mr. Donovan, then skipping past the number presentation and going to the top of the next page, did you prepare Exhibits 1A, 1B, and 1C?
They were prepared at my request by Lincoln County Healthcare Chief Financial Officer Wayne Printey. In my position as Chief Executive Officer, I am very familiar with this type of financial analysis and rely on this type of analysis in the regular course of our business. I have reviewed the pro forma information presented here, discussed the underlying assumptions with Mr. Printey, and I am satisfied that it reflects the most reliable estimate of demand and financial consequence if compliance with Condition 3 were required.
Will the provisions in Condition 3 that envision procedures for getting relief from Condition 3 under specified conditions avoid these losses? No.
Under any circumstance, Lincoln Health will have to have sustained losses for at least 18 months or 24 months for these procedures even to be available. Then there will be a process that Lincoln County Healthcare has to go through to prove the losses, including hearings. While the process is ongoing, Lincoln County Healthcare will continue to be bearing the losses. Under the best of circumstances, the process will take significant time. Delay equals further accumulation of losses. For the reasons covered above, we already know, to a high degree of probability, that compliance with Condition 3 will cause the urgent care center to sustain substantial incremental losses. Lincoln County Healthcare could be sharing its results with the department monthly, and it would be obvious to the DHHS after month 1, 2, 3, or 4 that we will be losing money. It makes no financial sense, and it will be a waste of the community's scarce healthcare resources to have to wait for the accumulation of losses over 18 months to begin the process of seeking relief from Condition 3.
What will be the financial consequences if Lincoln Health is forced to sustain these losses?
The losses are substantial and represent an unsustainable healthcare delivery model of a type that we would expect the department to reject as economically infeasible if it were evaluated under Certificate of Need criteria. Incurring such losses annually will require Lincoln County Healthcare and Lincoln Health to consider various measures to offset the losses, reversing in whole or in part the $7.2 million reduction in prices that we initiated in October 2013, suspending or scaling back plans to expand skilled nursing care beds in the Booth Bay Harbor area, and or cutting Lincoln Health services or operations that may reduce care available for critically needed services. These losses, unless covered through the measures above, will damage our financial condition.
Are there healthcare needs in the community that would be better served by the deployment of resources that would be lost if the urgent care center's hours of operation were expanded?
Yes, these were summarized in Lincoln County Healthcare's request for reconsideration of June 27, 2014, although the Commissioner probably can infer them from the November 15, 2013 CON application, the staff's preliminary analysis in March 2014, and a development that is now a matter of public record. Throughout the public hearing process and public comment period this past winter, there were consistent and repeated comments about the need for access to rehabilitation beds or skilled nursing beds. The Lincoln County Healthcare and Lincoln Health boards and management share that assessment. As anticipated in the staff's preliminary analysis, page 43, in February 2014, Lincoln County Healthcare and Lincoln Health increased the Gregory Wings dually licensed skilled nursing capacity from 6 to 30 beds. It is also now a matter of public record that in April of 2014, Lincoln County Healthcare and Lincoln Health filed a letter of intent with the department to further expand the Gregory Wings skilled nursing capacity by an additional 12 beds. Lincoln County Healthcare and Lincoln Health are currently preparing a Certificate of Need application demonstrating the need for expanded nursing capacity, skilled nursing capacity. This is a vital community need that offers expanded services for the residents of the Booth Bay region and the rest of Lincoln County. Absent extraordinary circumstances or unforeseen developments, Lincoln County Healthcare will move forward with a full CON application for the expansion if we are relieved from the certainty of losses to be suffered by compliance with Condition number 3 in the CON. If Condition number 3 remains in effect, we can provide no such assurances.
Does this complete your pre-filed testimony as of August 1, 2014?
Yes, with the understanding that I may have the opportunity to respond to points that may be raised for the first time in pre-filed testimony by others on August 7th or at hearings by others.
Tender the witness for cross-examination, sir.
Thank you.
Again, I'd just like to renew my objection to the whole line of testimony that discusses skilled beds. That's not relevant to condition number 3, and I think it's inappropriate for the hearing. Mr. Donovan, you said you were CEO of Lincoln Health since 2008. Were you with that organization or Lincoln County Healthcare prior to 2008?
No, I started in June 2008.
So before that, you had nothing to do with that entity?
Correct.
You described nighttime urgent care coverage as unneeded and not clinically appropriate. What's your basis to evaluate need and clinical appropriateness?
Well, the need is showed by the facts, the numbers. When we look back at the actual experience of the St. Andrews Emergency Department for fiscal year 13, we see 2 or less patients during that 12-hour period. Therefore, that drives those costs that I talked about in my pre-filed testimony. And that low volume of patients, I think in any urgent or certainly emergent clinical setting, provides challenges for the clinicians that raise concerns about clinical quality and safety.
So need is just based on numbers?
No, I wouldn't. I don't think I said that. I think I said it's based on, we look at the numbers and we see that we have 2 or less people coming every night on average, and that low volume number drives concerns about quality and patient safety.
So this was all done by the number crunchers. Did you confer with the doctors that were actually staffing?
No, as I just said, the numbers drive the concerns about quality and patient safety, and these decisions were fully discussed and fully vetted by our physicians back prior to the board making its original decision in July of 2012. And actually, the board committee that made the recommendation around the change is a committee that is populated more by physicians than lay people. It's a majority of physicians.
Well, let's talk about the clinical staff. Wouldn't the staff that was manning St. Andrews also rotate with Miles?
For the most part, yes.
So they'd get the same care whether they presented in St. Andrews or in Miles?
Not necessarily.
The same doctors would provide a different level of care to the
No, but yeah, you got to think about the size of the organizations that we're talking about. At Miles, there's backup available. There's specialists readily available. There's techs on duty 24/7. There's on-call radiology. And we don't have that at St. Andrews during the night. At St. Andrews during the night, we have a tech, a doc, and a nurse.
But with all the technology, aren't they available by phone, by computer? And isn't that only going to improve with time?
Well, you might want to ask that of Dr. Foy when you have a chance, but from my understanding and my perspective, the need to have a team to take care of people who are emergently presenting themselves is the real key to quality and the kind of patient outcomes that we expect of our organization.
Do you feel that a condition has to be life-threatening to require care in the middle of the night? Is that the only reason somebody should get care in the middle of the night?
If it's life-threatening, I would hope they would call 911.
That would obviously be an issue, but
Yeah.
if it's not life-threatening, should they have care available to them at that time of day or night?
I think that depends. We have care.
On whether or not they're related to you, or?
No,
Let me stop.
Yeah, this.
I understand there are emotions here, both sides, but I'd ask you, try not to audibly react to the testimony or the questions. Thank you.
And the reason I said that is because any patient, any resident of the community who is a patient of one of the Lincoln Medical Partners, primary care physicians, has access to a physician 24 hours a day on call.
And what about if they're not? What about if they're a summer resident? What about if they don't have a primary care physician? What's their option?
Their option is 911, if it's a true emergency, or their option is to wait until the center is opened, or their option is to go to Miles or to Brunswick, if they feel the need to do that in the middle of the night.
Isn't there a benefit, though, to a patient to see somebody with some level of professional care in the middle of the night? Is the patient always the best person to know whether it's life-threatening and 911 is the answer?
I'm not a doctor, I can't answer that.
You state that increasing the hours will result in unneeded service. How do you define unneeded services?
Just as I did, low volume, high expense, and quality and patient safety concerns.
So the doctors are sitting in the facility waiting for patients that are not showing up in the numbers that you require. Are there other things they could be doing during that time, that downtime?
If they're not taking care of patients, I don't think so.
You don't bill for downtime for doctors?
Now you're getting into the reimbursement issues.
Correct.
So, according to cost-based reimbursement, which we have within Lincoln Health, there is recognition for physician downtime, yes. And that's, by the way, that's factored into all of our financial analysis that you have in front of you.
So these doctors are rotating through a busier emergency room over in Miles. They can use the unproductive time in this facility to do administrative tasks, and you will actually be compensated for that.
Like I said, yes, the cost-based reimbursement recognizes the downtime of physicians when they're not taking care of patients.
So did you guys come up with a number that would make urgent care during the night needed? You said 2 wasn't enough. How many would be enough? What would be the threshold?
As we looked at that, the threshold is probably just kind of extrapolating those numbers somewhere between 12 and 14.
How many present at Miles at any given night?
Oh, I don't know that off the top of my head.
Well, it should be at least 12 or 14, right?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
So then why do we have an arbitrary 12 or 14 for this facility?
It's not arbitrary, it's calculated.
But it's got no basis on what's going on over in Miles. You didn't compare the 2 facilities and the use?
You didn't ask me that question,
I asked you if you could give me the number in Miles.
and I said I couldn't.
Did you compare the 2 facilities when you were determining what was the threshold of minimum use required for this facility?
I would say we take a very holistic view when we look at all of our clinical programs and services, so yes.
So would you estimate then that in Miles it has to be at least 12 or 15 people a night?
Again, off the top of my head, I can't say that.
Well, I don't understand the analysis then. Why is it okay for this facility to require 12 to 14 and not the same rule for Miles?
That's not the question you asked me. You
It
asked
is
me
a
you asked me what the threshold was. You asked me for a break-even threshold.
And I'm asking,
Yeah.
so it's all about money.
No, but that's what you asked.
I'm asking how you came up with it.
If we look at the losses and with the volume that we projected, we would have to have essentially 6 to 7 times that volume in order to get close to break even. So that's where I go from roughly 2 a night to 12 to 14 a night, 6 to 7 times the volume, which we've never had, which is totally unfeasible.
But the commissioner doesn't anticipate that you would have to break even, does she?
Jack, there's no basis for knowing what the commissioner anticipates.
Well, there's her letter with condition number 3,
Right.
and she says because of the need that's been established by the community input, they are anticipating that there could be losses as much as $500,000, right?
She places financial metrics on the conditions, yes.
So she's not requiring for this condition to be appropriate and to continue. She's not requiring that you break even with your nighttime urgent care, correct?
No, I don't think that's the case. I think what the commissioner is saying, that if we don't meet certain financial thresholds, which are measured by marginal losses for the 12 hours from 8P to 8A, that we can seek a reversal of the condition. That's what she's saying.
Right, but there's an anticipation that the need is so great that some loss at some level would be tolerated for the good of the public. Isn't that correct?
I don't think the need's great at all.
I didn't ask you that question.
No, no.
I'm asking you what the commissioner has demonstrated in her letter of May 27th. Isn't she anticipating that because the need is so great, some losses might be appropriate?
I'll sustain your objection as to what the commissioner
I don't
is
know.
anticipating. This condition speaks for itself.
You mentioned that DLRS staff conferred with Lincoln County Healthcare as required by statute before releasing its preliminary analysis. And no mention was made of 24-hour urgent care requirement. When did that meeting take place?
The first, when we conferred to them, it took place, well, prior to their release of their March 14th preliminary analysis.
So there was one meeting or more than one?
It was one discussion and then the release of the preliminary analysis, as I remember.
So were any of the other interested parties invited to participate in that meeting?
I don't know.
Well, who would have invited them?
I assume the DLRS staff would have if it was appropriate.
You didn't invite anybody from the foundation?
No, I did not know.
No. You didn't think that would have helped to get more input?
That wasn't my place to invite somebody to a meeting that I did not call.
Well, more information is more powerful for everyone, isn't it?
It
Excuse me,
wasn't-
Mr. Chairman, is she going to be able to argue with the witness all day or just till lunch?
I'll give her a little leeway. I'm not sure she's arguing yet.
No one ever questioned the possibility because the community is so passionate about this, about including them in this process?
Again, I'm not the person to ask. It was not my meeting.
You didn't think it would have been helpful?
It was not my meeting.
You based your cost projections for 24-hour urgent care on the record of nighttime visits by patients arriving under their own steam, not by ambulance, to the St. Andrews ER in 2013 before it was closed on October 1st. Do you really think that's a fair basis for your whole premise?
Yes.
But the hospital was closing. Everybody knew the hospital was closing.
But those actual numbers were the facts.
Don't you think once the writing was on the wall that the hospital was closing, that it was a sinking ship, that numbers automatically declined?
Numbers at St. Andrews have been declining for 20 years.
That's not the question I
No,
asked
that's
you.
my answer.
Did they decline dramatically once the closing was announced?
Before the closing, actually, going back 5 years before the board made its decision, emergency department volume had dropped 20%.
So then why did you base your numbers on just such a small, discrete period of time after it was announced that it was going to be closing?
The numbers would have been the same for the previous 5 years.
Well, what were the numbers the previous 5 years?
Off the top of my head, I don't know.
Well, don't you think that would have been relevant?
Well, we know that the volume had declined 20% over that 5-year period.
But it declined dramatically in the period that you used for your analysis, correct?
No.
But you can't tell me the difference.
It continued the trend. The downward trend continued through this process. It did not drop off a cliff, if that's what you're asking.
Would you agree with me that it would make sense that once a facility is marked for closure, less people are going to show up for care?
I possibly.
If you
I think
heard
we
a
could-
restaurant was closing, would you think that you'd get the same kind of a meal there as you would when it was thriving? Would you maybe go somewhere else?
I don't know what I would do.
Well, the writing was on the wall is what I'm trying to establish, correct?
We were very open with the community about what the board's decision was in July 2012, yes. Come on.
Would you have any idea what the numbers were in 2012?
I could get those, no?
But you don't know?
No, I don't know.
Do you know if it was less than 2013? Or the same?
I would guess we're very, very close. For those nighttime hours, those numbers were very close.
Are we talking the total number that presents, whether they got there by ambulance or ambulatory, or are we just talking about ambulatory
For which,
for 2008 to 2012?
the 20% decline?
Yeah.
That would have been total.
Total?
All patients arriving.
So what's the decline for just the ambulatory? People that get there on their own?
It would have been it would have been 20%.
You just said the whole total was 20%.
Yeah, the ambulance numbers are small coming to St.
How
Andrews.
small?
You'd have to ask the ambulance service staff, but compared to the total number of patients that were seen, of roughly 4,400, somewhere in that range, and then that number dropped to the high 3,000s over that period of time. I think the number, the percentage of people who walk in or are brought in on their own steam, as you said, is by far the vast majority.
Because this is such an important issue, don't you think the community has a right to know what those numbers are for the last 5 years and not just the last year?
I think those numbers have been discussed over the past 2 years. All those numbers have appeared in the Booth Bay Register on a number of occasions.
And you basing projections for urgent care based on past ER care, that's not necessarily accurate, is it?
We're basing it on the number of patients who arrive not via ambulance during that period of time. That's what that less than 2 a day is.
Do you know how many patients have presented at the urgent care center between October 1st and today?
Yes.
How many?
It's actually on that number right there. We project just under 3,000 visits by the end of our fiscal year.
I'm sorry?
About 3,000 by September 30th.
And what was it for the same period last year, October 1st through today?
For the same period last year would have been actually within one patient a day less. I'm sorry, more than what we're seeing. We've seen the community's understanding of the hours of the urgent care center has been very obvious because we've seen a shift in usage. So we have seen less than one patient a day less in 12 hours than we saw in 24 hours a year ago. So for example, I'll pick the number. We've seen about, I'm thinking that going back to October through the summer months, which have been very busy, our daily average for the urgent care center has been around 8 a day. A year ago, that would have been 9. So I'm comparing 12 hours, 8, 24 hours, 9. And then during the summer, it picks up, so our average by the end of the year will probably be in the low double digits.
Do you have any idea how many of those people wait until the facility opens that would have presented at night?
We don't, except...
You don't track that?
No, we don't track that.
Do you track whether or not if they had presented earlier, their condition would have been resolved more easily?
No.
So that's a possibility.
Again, that sounds like a doctor question.
You said before that the numbers between 2008 and 2012 are available. I'm just new to this, so if you could please at some point present those so they could be put on the record. They could be submitted by the Friday deadline. I would appreciate that.
Well,
What's the well?
what is it you want from me?
The numbers. My basic premise is that it's not fair to just look at the last year of activity. We want to know what happened since 2008. Once the hospital was marked to be closed, I think a lot of people decided it was no longer an appropriate place to seek medical care. I feel like that definitely contributed to the decline, which is why I think they've used a discrete period of time to make that analysis.
May I be heard on this?
Yes.
The feelings and suppositions and speculations of this attorney are not testimony, although she's doing a valiant job of making it sound like testimony. We will do whatever we can to respond to the commissioner's needs for information, but I don't think we're just going to agree on horseback here to run errands for adversary counsel. And so if there's going to be something required, we ask that the state of Maine, and not the intervener, direct it in a very clear way that responsible people will have the capacity to respond in a timely and accurate fashion and not be told later, that's not what she wanted.
And if I may respond, Mr. readily available. Shouldn't be any great burden. I feel like it's an important enough issue that the community has a right to know what was going on before the hospital was announced to be closing.
Well, I know you came in on this late, but I'm not going to require the production of that information at this late date. Or feel free in your closing arguments to talk about it and maybe make a request to the commissioner. If she feels it's important, then she'll do whatever she wants to do with it.
What was the greatest number of people that presented at the urgent care center?
On any given day?
Yes.
I believe the record for the month of July was 32, which is the high for the year.
And do you track how many of the patients need to be transferred to an emergency room?
Yes.
And what's the percentage of that?
You might want to save that for Dr. Foray. We do track that on a daily basis, given the number of ambulance runs that leave the urgent care center to go to a hospital.
Do you also have patients that are transferred directly to a hospital without presenting at an ER? Do they go from the urgent care to the hospital for admission?
I believe they would go from the urgent care through the emergency department for
So they all
admission.
channel through the emergency room?
Mhm.
Excuse me, Mr. Donovan, you have to answer in words because the reporter is
Oh.
taking down what you say, not what you
My
nod.
apologies.
Is it ever a case that those patients are not accommodated at Miles due to a lack of available beds?
Yes.
How often has that happened?
The issue here is the critical access status of Lincoln Health and the limit on the number of beds that a critical access hospital may have, which is 25. Over and the times that we are able, or are not able rather, to accommodate all patients tend to happen sporadically. So it's not all the time, and they tend to happen in bunches.
How many times a month?
The months are, if you're talking about a winter month, probably 0.
How about in July?
Month of July, I don't have those numbers in front of me, but it would have been a few in the month of July. But also it would have been a few in the month of July last year or the year before, because some of these patients are not just transferred because of bed availability, they're transferred because of clinical appropriateness and clinical need.
I was just specifically asking about the ones that don't have a bed.
A handful in
So it
July.
is an issue.
It's not an issue. It's part of being a critical access hospital.
And this year, more people were transferred to a higher level of care for lack of beds than the year before?
The year before, we were not a critical access hospital. So not for a higher level of care, no, I'm sorry. For a higher level of care, you would assume that the transfer rate would have been the same. But for just availability of beds, it's probably a little higher.
I'm referring to the interview that you gave to the Booth Bay Register.
Yep,
And at that point in time, you said this year Lincoln Health transferred more patients to other facilities due to the need for a higher level of care and a lack of beds than in the previous year.
yes,
So you're standing by that?
yes, that's what I just said.
25% more patients were transferred out of Lincoln Health ER to another facility for a higher level of care?
For a higher level of care, yes.
Yep. 400 compared to 320 in the same period last year.
Yep,
Almost twice as many acute patients were transferred to another facility from the ER due to a lack of available beds at Miles.
right.
So there were 37 people that didn't have a bed this year as opposed to 20 last year.
Right.
So that's an issue.
I said that, like I said, that's one of the trade-offs of being a critical access hospital.
So if those people present and there's no bed, aren't we losing even more time before they can be treated?
Well, they're appropriately triaged before they would be transferred.
But doesn't the
Oh.
additional transfer cause any problem as far as the care goes?
I don't know. I don't think so.
You don't think there's any detriment?
No. I think the care is handled appropriately by the doctors on either end of the transfer, which is what we do all the time.
In the prior interview to that, you said to the Booth Bay Register that you continue to see patients at the urgent care center that actually need emergency care, and you cited the period of October through May. How many patients arriving at St. Andrews campus are considered to be emergency cases in October through May? Do you track that?
What we do track is the number of ambulances that go out from the urgent care center to a higher level of care. And in any given month, that averages about one every other day.
Do you know any idea what the percentage is?
No, not off the top of my head.
What about the period from May through July? It's much higher.
I wouldn't say it's much higher, no.
So you don't get a higher ratio of emergency cases in the summer than you do in the rest of the year?
Actually, the fall is when we have some of the higher numbers. July is our busiest month, but like September, October are very close. So it runs through that period of time. Those are probably our busiest months.
So if you have emergency cases showing up during the daytime, wouldn't you be likely to have emergency cases showing up at night as well?
Again, that's what 911 is for.
One of the questions I had about your costs was where did those numbers come from? Do they have any overhead costs for miles or the administration for Maine Health?
No.
Lincoln Health?
No, those are marginal costs for keeping the urgent care center open an additional 12 hours.
So for instance, the doctors that rotate back and forth between miles, how did you come up with those costs for them?
Hourly basis.
The hours that they're out St. Andrews?
Yep.
What about their benefits? Are those included in
Yep.
that as well? They'd get the same benefits if they were just working at miles, right?
Yes.
So is it really appropriate to include that in here, and that's a cost
Well,
that you're
it's
incurring anyway?
it's proportional. It's proportional.
But you'd have to
So
pay
we're not counting it
100%
twice.
of their benefits if they were just practicing at miles, correct?
Well, remember, these doctors are all partners in a single group, so everything is spread equally depending upon where they're located. It's proportional.
But it sounds like there's additional costs that are being put into your numbers that you're paying anyway that are going to happen regardless of whether this facility is open and staffed.
No, we're
24
not
hours a
double
day.
counting. We're not double counting any numbers.
But my point is that you'd have to pay those benefits to the doctors if they just practiced at miles. You're allocating a portion of that to St. Andrews campus.
Because we're also allocating the hours that they're working to the St. Andrews campus.
Right, but I'm suggesting that's not appropriate. Wherever they practice, you've got to pay those benefits at miles.
No, they're not. We're not double counting.
You project operating losses of $675,000 to $733,000 per year for running the urgent care center as a result of the additional 12 hours of operation. Why is it more than double?
More than double
The losses, 12 hours during the day, why are the 12 hours at
Volume.
night more than double?
volume. Volume.
Volume of what?
Patients. Patients.
So you're saying you're going to have more patients at night?
We're going to have more patients. No, the reason that the losses are doubled is because we have more patients during the day to cover our costs than we have at night.
So the actual cost to the patient is more.
We haven't decided, if this goes through, one of the decisions our board and management has to make is how we're going to charge for it.
So if we don't have nighttime care available here, have you considered the cost to the community? We're going to have an additional cost for ambulance, correct?
Yes?
Are we going to have additional costs to the patients?
That totally depends on patients' financial status and insurance status.
There'll be pain, suffering, and burden on families as well.
Is
How
that a
many
question?
patients-
No, I didn't say that.
How many patients have presented dead on arrival since October 1st, 2013 at the Miles campus?
I don't know.
You know if there's any?
I don't know.
Is it possible that if they had presented at an urgent care, if there are patients, that they would have survived?
I don't know.
Object to the speculative foundationalists, quite outside the scope of what we're here for.
Sustained.
Did you consider alternative staffing models? I believe you're going to staff the urgent care with ER doctors. Have you thought about using a mid-level clinician instead?
We
like
have.
a physician's
We did.
assistant?
Yeah, we ran those numbers.
And you rejected that?
Yes.
What were the difference in numbers?
The difference in numbers is a lot less than you'd expect. Actually, we have them. We have those numbers.
For a
because-
PA or a nurse practitioner or what?
Yes.
What did you do?
For what we call mid-levels, which would be a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant. And the driving factor here to understand is that you asked me a question earlier about doctors' costs being covered when they're not seeing patients. That is an allowable cost for doctors. It is not an allowable cost for mid-level providers. So the difference, can you put it up there?
Which ones do we want? I have 4 of them.
Wayne, would you?
For the record, Mr. Chairman, this is Mr. Prenti, who is responsible for much of this, and he brought these with him, and I'm going to let him manage them on the easel so I don't put the wrong ones up. I hope we have copies on paper also, Wayne?
I do now.
We will submit them in due course.
So the issue here, Counselor, is that under critical access hospital status, we are reimbursed on a cost basis for Medicare and Medicaid patients. What's called Medicare's allowable cost is not our actual costs, it is what Medicare allows. And while they allow downtime for physicians to be considered a cost, they do not do so for mid-level providers. So, is he allowed to talk about this?
Not yet.
Okay, so you want me to talk about it? May I get up?
Well, you
We
can
have-
decide which one.
Well, let me just say, if I'm deciding, I think this cross-examination has gone way far afield. We have the witness who did the exhibits, who we would proffer as a rebuttal witness in due course, and it'll go a whole lot easier if counsel asks the questions to him when his turn comes than to have this tag team.
Well, if Mr. Donovan thinks that another witness would better answer the questions, and he can say so instead of trying to answer a question.
Wayne would be better to answer these questions than I. As I said, he prepared the exhibits and he and I reviewed them.
Okay.
Okay, so according to your charts, you show the loss per patient of $45 a day and $12.40 during the nighttime. So the average would be $244 per patient. That would be the loss.
Yes.
And you think that's too much to save a life?
Is that
Sustained.
actually? Thank you.
How much has the net revenue for the Miles Emergency Department increased since October 1st, 2013?
It's declined by 20%.
So they're not getting our emergency patients.
I don't know what you mean by our.
The Booth Bay region.
We're all part of Lincoln County.
Right, but wouldn't you, if you
but-
close the emergency room in the Booth Bay Peninsula, didn't you anticipate that you would get more cases in Miles?
We did not know what would happen, but I can say that emergency department use across the state is down. So we're not the only one who's seeing it down.
Do you know why that is?
It's part of actually a concerted effort on the part of clinicians across Maine, in particular our system. I can speak to the Maine health system to reduce emergency department usage.
What do you anticipate Miles' increased reimbursement to be in regard to the critical access hospital?
It's not Miles, it's Lincoln Health. Lincoln Health is the name of the hospital.
So what would the increase be because of that status?
We estimated, I think somewhere around, excuse me, somewhere around $4.5 million.
How much?
4.5 or 4.5, which was reimbursement that was in the St. Andrews campus already. Our goal was to maintain critical access status for all of Lincoln County, which we did.
So that additional income, does that show up on those charts at all?
Yes, that's netted
That's in
out.
there?
Yep.
Could you explain the planning process you lead each year in making recommendations for service line staffing and capital investment for board action?
We go through of course, a budgeting process each year.
Is that the primary concern?
Pardon me?
Is budgeting the primary concern?
No.
Excuse me, I'd like the witness
I-
to be allowed to finish one answer before he's interrupted with the next question, if I may.
The court reporter would probably appreciate that, too.
And as part of the budgeting process, a committee that I referenced earlier, which is mostly physicians, has input to the clinical planning aspects of the annual budget process. So we're all, the ultimate focus is on the needs of the patients, the service lines that we have, and how we improve quality, safety, and access. So no, it's not just about a budgeting process.
Are the physicians' specialties matched with community care needs?
Well, since most of the physicians that are members of our medical staff are primary care physicians, I would say yes.
Last year, you said patients were seeking more outpatient services and that the reason for losses were declining admissions. Now, in the Bouquet Register of August 7th, you stated that outpatient services are down 6.5%. Why is that?
True. Well, it's a phenomenon that, again, we're seeing across the region. So very similar at Penn Bay, very similar at Waldo County. We're seeing flattening of inpatient services. So while I said that last year, it's not that inpatient admissions are up. They're flat from where they ended up last year. So they stopped going down. Maybe that's a better way of putting it. Now on the outpatient side, we've seen a dip. Yeah, it's an average of about 6.5% across the various outpatient departments this year.
How many doctors totally are in the entity?
The size of the medical staff, which includes all specialties, is probably close to 200.
Just doctors.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking
How many ER doctors?
about. Between 12 and 15, including some part-timers.
Doesn't that seem like a lot?
To cover an ER 24/7? No.
No.
You have to have people to cover all the hours.
What's your level of confidence that Lincoln County Healthcare will have at least one hospital emergency room in 2017?
Very high.
You think 2017 will still have one?
Yes.
2020?
Yes.
Even if it's losing money?
Yes.
You stated it would be obvious to DHHS after month 1, 2, or 3 that you'll be losing money. Have you considered the possibility of adjusting staffing levels or a contribution from the parent organization Maine Health to help sustain the gap for service?
Object to compound question.
Can you answer that?
If we try this
Part.
and we're losing money, can you regroup and come up with another solution to make it work? Have you thought about that?
Well, we thought about the alternative staff.
I'll step in because, you know, we're going a long time here on this cross. You're asking for speculation, and I'm not sure that it's relevant with regards to the issue we have in front of us about what some other plan might be if condition 3 kicks in.
I guess what I'm wondering is, have you considered giving it a chance to see if it works? And if there are losses, trying to reassess what can be done to alleviate those?
For the 12 hours a day,
For the nighttime?
no, we have not. The nighttime came up in May, as we talked about earlier, came up as an issue in May.
So wouldn't
And
that
we've
be
been
a
dealing it
reasonable
since then.
solution to try it?
We
See
don't-
how it works?
Excuse me,
Let
it's not a
him
negotiation.
finish.
Yeah. No, we
Mr.
don't
Chairman.
believe so.
I've already addressed that.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the 7.2 million in price reductions you initiated in October.
Mhm.
Now, what was the basis for that?
Pardon me?
What was the basis for that price reduction? Is that something you just arbitrarily decided to do, or
No,
were
it's
you charging too much?
No, very strategic. St. Andrews and Miles have the distinction of being the two most expensive hospitals in the state from a price standpoint, and unfortunately had held that distinction for a number of years. So our goal since the creation of Lincoln County Healthcare, when I came on board in 2008, was to keep our price increases to a minimum, as low as we could, which we have done. And then in this past year, starting October 1st for us, we, because of the changes with the kind of spreading the critical access benefit across both campuses, we felt we were in a position to not only limit the price increase, but to implement a price decrease. And we strategically focused on several areas, mostly outpatient areas, lab, radiology, departments like that, and arrived at a price decrease. Now this is price, a gross revenue decrease, if you will, of 7.1% by looking at certain departments that we felt would benefit from that decrease. And because of the critical access hospital cost reimbursement benefit that I've mentioned before, we felt we're in a position to implement a price decrease this year, which we did.
So was that something you had to do because you weren't being reimbursed to the full extent?
No, we wanted to do it because we felt it would make us more competitive when it came to the outpatient and particularly the commercial business.
So have you seen that jump in volume since you decreased the cost?
No,
per unit?
as I said earlier, as you said earlier, our outpatient volume has declined this year.
So it looks like that was maybe a mistake then. You've
No.
cut your revenue and you haven't increased your volume.
Change
No.
the form.
Sustain.
So who actually benefits from those price reductions?
The commercially and self-insured. Doesn't matter to Medicare or Medicaid.
So the insurance companies
Yeah,
and sometimes the individuals if they have no insurance.
correct.
Is there any reason you couldn't raise those rates again to decrease your losses?
Well, as I think as in my pre-filed testimony, it said that one of the things we might have to consider is doing just that, which we don't want to do.
It doesn't seem to affect your numbers either way.
Objection.
Sustain.
You state that skilled nursing beds are a vital community need. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Then why'd you cut the number of beds in the initial application?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
I'm going to sustain the unannounced objection. Irrelevant for me right now. I want us to try, all right, we need to close this up on the cross. We've been doing it a long time, and I want to, if you've got specific questions with regards to condition 3 and what they presented, I'd like to hear them or finish off with them.
That's all I have then.
Thank you. Rebuttal?
Let me redirect.
A redirect?
No redirect. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Donovan.
Thank you.
Dr. Foray, please.
If you could raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth to the best of your ability and belief?
It is.
Thank you.
As was the case with Mr. Donovan, Doctor, I'm going to read these questions and ask you to read verbatim the answers from your free file testimony for the benefit of the public and the television audience. Please state your name and title.
My name is Dr. Mark Foray. I am an emergency physician and chief medical officer for Lincoln County Healthcare. I have served as an emergency physician at Lincoln County Healthcare for 8 years and as chief medical officer for 2 years.
Are you familiar with the operations of the Lincoln Health Urgent Care Center operations in Booth Bay Harbor?
Yes. Since October 2013, the St. Andrews campus has provided urgent care services to hundreds of patients. The facility is open 12 hours a day, every day.
What is the difference from a medical point of view between urgent care provided currently at the former St. Andrews Hospital campus and emergency care?
By definition, urgent care services provide treatment for medical problems such as an illness or injury that needs attention but is not life-threatening.
Based on your experience as an emergency room physician and your duties as Chief Medical Officer for Lincoln Health, can you tell us whether extending the urgent care center's hours of operation substantially address otherwise unmet health needs?
It would not. There is not a substantial public need for 24-hour urgent care. Urgent care addresses non-life-threatening health needs, not emergency care needs. Due to the types of illnesses and injuries that are seen at an urgent care center and the low demand that a community the size of Booth Bay Region places on such a facility, it is extremely rare to be open 24 hours a day at any locations other than the largest metropolitan areas. I'm not aware of any urgent care centers in Maine that are operated around the clock. Brighton First Care, Maine Medical Center's urgent care service in Portland, operates daily between 9 a.m. and 8 p.m.
Are you able to project the demand for urgent care services that would materialize at the Lincoln Health Urgent Care Center during the extended nighttime hours required by condition number 3?
Based on historical utilization, we forecast there would be an annual total ranging between 592 and 805 urgent care visits between the hours of 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. This forecast is based on St. Andrews Emergency Department actual 2013 experience of visits not arriving by ambulance. The likely forecast demand, 592 patients annually, is 1.6 patients per day, or 1 patient every 7.4 hours of extended operation.
How does this compare with the demand during the daytime hours?
The Lincoln Health 12-hour urgent care center is forecast to serve 2,964 patient visits between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. with a staffing complement of an emergency physician, a registered nurse, and an emergency technician.
What are the staffing implications of a 24-hour requirement on the urgent care center?
The additional 12 hours of operation daily would more than double the urgent care center's staffing requirements.
Are there any quality of care implications associated with staffing during nighttime hours?
Yes, because of low demand, the job is by definition a sit-around-and-wait type position. That configuration is ill-suited to attract both highly qualified and highly motivated staffing. The chances are high that the only qualified clinicians that would be located to occupy these slots would be temporary providers who are not committed to our community and who, by the very nature of the job, would prefer a job that entails much more downtime than actually providing patient care. This concern is not just based on my own experience. Lincoln Health's board-certified emergency physicians and clinicians determined that providing 24-hour emergency urgent care at the Miles campus and 12-hour urgent care at the St. Andrews campus provides better and safer care than providing 24-hour care at 2 campuses.
Do you have any additional concerns from a patient safety perspective with the operation of a 24-hour urgent care center at the Lincoln Health campus in Booth Bay Harbor?
I do. It is, in a sense, anecdotal, but a real worry. I'm very concerned that individuals may think that emergency care is returning to the St. Andrews campus and that appropriate emergency services may be delayed if they choose to present at the urgent care center instead of calling 911.
Does this complete your pre-filed testimony as of August 1, 2014?
Yes, with the understanding that I may have the opportunity to respond to points that may be raised for the first time in pre-filed testimony by others on August 7th or at the hearing by others.
Tender the witness for cross-examination.
Thank you.
Thank you. The thing that jumps right out at me is that you testified that the sit-around-and-wait type position attracts less qualified doctors.
No, I believe it's a personnel.
You're not talking about the doctors?
The primary challenge with staffing that we had with the emergency department at St. Andrews was with nursing.
It was with clinicians?
Nursing.
Nursing. So there would be no problem with the actual doctor, the quality of the doctor that's there?
We believe it would be a bit of a challenge, but we would be able to achieve good physician staffing.
Well, it's a rotation of the same doctors at Miles, correct?
We would need to add additional physicians because we don't have enough right now.
But the actual quality of the physicians would probably be comparable to what's happening at Miles, correct?
We would aim to achieve that. We would aim to achieve that.
You think that would be a problem, though?
It would be a challenge.
Why, if it's the same doctors in the rotation?
Because physicians don't like working in a place where they cannot practice their craft.
So the same doctor's going to give less consistent care in a different location?
No.
Do you know how long it might take for a physician to be delayed as a result of a need to transport a patient in the middle of the night from Boothbay Harbor to the nearest facility in Damascotta or Brunswick? Any idea how much time we would be losing?
I don't understand the question.
Well, if a person presents at the urgent care center versus going to Damascotta or Brunswick, what's the time differential?
Are you asking what the transport time is between
Before
St.
they see-
Andrews and Miles?
Correct, before they see a doctor.
The time differential is about 20, 25 minutes.
To Damascotta,
Correct.
and to Brunswick it'd be longer.
Yes, true.
Does that differential ever have an impact on treatment?
It would depend on the patient.
So is the answer then sometimes yes?
Sometimes, yes.
Do you know how many people have presented dead on arrival at the Miles campus since October 1st?
I do not.
Do you know if there's been any?
I'm sure there has.
Do you think there's a possibility that could have been the extra driving time?
I think that's extraordinarily unlikely.
Are you aware of the fact that the River Road was closed recently for up to 3 hours because of a fatal accident?
No.
Route 27.
Route 27?
No.
Is that a concern at all, that people won't be able to get off the peninsula and get any medical care?
I believe ambulances would be able to negotiate that closure.
If the road's closed at a juncture before River Road?
I would expect that other emergency personnel would allow an ambulance to move through.
So you don't think there's any benefit for having a physician see a patient sooner for quicker stabilization?
I think there is an advantage to that.
There is. Would first response from a doctor be preferable to first response from an EMT in most situations?
Check the foundation.
Overruled.
It depends on the type of physician.
Well, it always depends on the individual, but doesn't a physician have more training than an EMT?
A physician has more training than an EMT.
Aren't they smarter usually?
I would not want to offer that conjecture.
It's not beyond possibility that you would actually benefit more from first contact with a doctor over an EMT?
That's a possibility, yes.
You mentioned Brighton First Care, an example of urgent care center that closes at night. How close is Brighton to a 24-hour emergency department?
So I
Maine
would
Medical
estimate
Center?
4 to 5 miles.
How much?
4 to 5 miles.
Maine Medical Center's nearby? Also Mercy?
Is that a question?
Are there 2 emergency rooms that are within 4 or 5 miles?
Yes.
So it's really not a comparison that's fair, is it,
I didn't make that comparison
in your testimony?
between
I think
Mercy
your
Hospital.
testimony was that you don't know of any urgent care facilities that are open at night. That's an example of one that's closed. There's other options. We don't have another option, do we?
You don't have another, I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
You use Brighton as an example of what is appropriate. It closes at night, so this one should be closed at night as well. But
I
I'm
simply-
trying to make the point that Brighton has nearby emergency rooms that are a lot closer than options for this community.
Check to the
I
phone.
think you made the
question.
point.
So the answer is,
I didn't understand the question.
Doesn't it make sense that the most appropriate time for an urgent care center to be open is when all the primary care offices are closed?
No.
Why do we need urgent care during the day when you can see a primary care physician?
Because it allows for increased flexibility for patients to be able to access health care.
Well, increased flexibility is not really urgent need, is it?
Some people would feel it's urgent.
But you agree they do have other options during the day?
Depends on the day.
Would you agree they don't have those options at night because the primary care offices are closed?
They can contact a primary care physician by phone, but they're missing the office visit hours, that's correct.
do the primary care physicians at a family care center typically do nighttime appointments?
No, I said by phone. They do take call at night. They're available 24/7.
And on-call services only apply to enrolled patients, correct? You can't cold call a family practitioner that you don't have a relationship with, is that right?
No.
So there would be no options for anybody that doesn't have a primary care or someone visiting
Options for what?
for urgent care in the middle of the night.
If there was not an urgent care center open, they would not have an option for that. That's correct.
What do you consider to be low volume?
It depends on the rest of the circumstances.
Well, what would you consider to be the threshold for necessary volume to keep an urgent care center open at night as a physician?
To keep an urgent care center open, I believe there needs to be an element of sustainability for the services that are rendered.
So we're talking about profitability.
You don't need to earn a profit, but you do need to exhibit good stewardship of healthcare spending, because if you misspend money in the wrong place, people are at risk of dying, and that's what we're hoping to avoid.
But would you agree that because there might be such a great need, that some sustainable losses would be appropriate?
Object to the form of foundation.
Sustained.
Could you repeat the question, please?
No. Sustain my objection.
Oh.
Rephrase or?
Oh, my apologies.
One of the-
I'm not an attorney.
I just won one.
Thank you, sorry.
I'm keeping track. I think you won 2. Go ahead.
Do you know how many people have presented at the urgent care each day since October 1st?
No.
Do you know average how many have presented?
It's been an average of 8, I believe, and it's increasing because we're coming into the summertime, because we're into the summertime.
Do you know the percentage that were treated and released?
In the beginning, approximately 91% were treated and released, and currently it's about 96% are treated and released.
And what level were the severity of their conditions?
It's variable.
The range? From most severe to minor?
Sure, from most severe to minor.
Do you think the best way to staff the urgent care is with emergency doctors?
We chose to staff the urgent care with emergency doctors because we made a commitment to the community that we would be able to provide care in a similar manner to what was in the emergency department if people were mistaken about where to present for care. We knew that from the experience at Brighton Medical Center and Brighton First Care that early on the community did not have a good understanding of what the difference was between an urgent care center and an emergency department. So when the urgent care center first opened on the St. Andrews campus, there was a similar rate of ill patients that required admission to the hospital. What we found is that the community has appropriately learned the difference, and that has decreased from an initial admission rate of 9% to approximately 4%. In order to meet that need for the community, we elected to staff the urgent care center with emergency physicians.
So is the plan then, once the community understands the difference, to reduce the number of ER doctors there and have a mid-level clinician taking care of the patients?
That's not an active plan, but that would be a consideration, yes.
Are ER physicians contractually obligated to provide administrative services? Is that part of their job?
No.
So do they?
Some have additional time that is dedicated to administration, and some do it on their own.
So there's no reason they couldn't be doing that on their downtime if they were at the St. Andrews campus?
Object to materiality, relevancy, foundation.
Sustained.
How is the urgent care center currently licensed for reimbursement purposes? Is it still licensed as an ER?
It is not.
When did that change?
I believe October 1st, but I'm not an expert in that side of the operation.
So is it licensed as an urgent care center?
It's not licensed as an emergency department. I'm not certain as to what the requirements around licensing and urgent care are.
Do you know if there's a difference license if it's urgent care 24 hours versus
Object
12?
again, beyond the scope.
I think this witness is probably the wrong one to ask those questions of. Sustained.
Do you think Miles is the best place for all patients to arrive for all conditions by ambulance?
No.
So if that's true, wouldn't it be more important to make the decision about where they go sooner rather than later?
Only if you have that capacity definitively.
So wouldn't a doctor have that capacity to a greater extent than an EMT?
Depends on the physician.
Well, it just makes sense to me that if you see a doctor, they can determine, do you need to go to Portland, to Maine Medical? Do you need to go to Midcoast? You're going to lose time if everybody automatically goes by ambulance to Miles, aren't you?
Object argumentative.
Overruled.
It depends on how that assessment would take place. Typically in an urgent care center, it's very difficult to engage in that type of an assessment and move the patient quickly through. So it depends on the setting that the physician is seeing the patient in.
Well, doctors are trained to make split decisions in a matter to save lives. They're going to have an opportunity, if the urgent care is open, to decide whether a patient is better going to Miles or to somewhere that has more capabilities.
Object to the foundational speculation in the question.
Well, it's certainly asking for speculation. Based on your own experience, doctor, can you answer that question?
Again, it depends on the context of the environment that you're providing care. Individual split decisions that you described are not actually typical of the way a physician functions. Physicians function within a system of care and use all of their assets available to them at their disposal to make the decision that they believe is best for the patient.
But if somebody's taken by ambulance to Miles and they determine there that they need to go somewhere else, we're losing time for treatment, aren't we?
It depends on the patient.
I think we're losing time regardless on the patient.
You know, because
Object to the
Being argumentative.
Okay. If a determination is made locally at the urgent care that a patient needs to go to Portland, Maine Medical Center, that will happen more quickly than if a patient is transferred from Booth Bay to Miles by ambulance and then taken from Miles down to Portland, correct?
it depends on what the resources are available to you to stabilize the patient. If you have a very limited number of resources and you have a more extensive requirement for stabilization, it may take a significantly longer period of time with a small staff. So that if you are in an emergency department that's fully staffed and equipped, you may be able to, in a more timely fashion, manage the patient's immediate needs and transfer them to the appropriate facility.
That's all I have.
Redirect?
You have a moment, please?
Sure.
No redirect, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, doctor. It's 19 till 12. I'm not ready to quit yet. I mean, as far as a little break for food or a restroom. I guess this is for those that wish to speak. You can see how we're doing. And I don't want to prevent anyone from speaking that wishes to. But if some of you are here for the same reason and to say the same thing, maybe at some point when we break, you can huddle and make a decision on whether one of you will be speaking and the other one might not, just so we can get what you want to say done and on the record before 5 o'clock. We might not need to do that. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But right now, it's going slower than I anticipated. So, yes, call your next witness.
Mr. Curtis, please.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth of the matter to the best of your ability and belief? I do. Thank you.
As with the other witnesses, Mr. Curtis, I will read the questions of your pre-filed testimony and ask you to read verbatim the answers in your pre-filed testimony. Please state your name and title.
My name is Jeff Curtis. I'm chairman of the Board of Trustees for Lincoln County Healthcare. I've served as chairman since 2013. I'm also a small business owner in the Mid-Coast region.
What is the purpose of your testimony here today?
I will address Lincoln County Healthcare's reasons why we are asking the department to drop its condition number 3, set forth in the Commissioner's May 27, 2014 letter granting the CON application with conditions, which would require Lincoln Health to provide 24-hour, 7-day-a-week urgent care services in the Booth Bay community. In addition to the lack of demand for the service and the negative financial burden placed on Lincoln Health, our reasons are grounded in the board's vision for healthcare delivery in the region, which was set forth in the CON application, Exhibit 1-A, and the burden this condition could have on achieving that vision. Other witnesses will speak to the negative quality and operational ramifications of operating a 24-hour urgent care service and the financial onus that will be placed on Lincoln County Healthcare if required to operate a 24-hour urgent care service.
What is the board's vision for healthcare in Lincoln County that would be burdened by the imposition of condition number 3?
Again, this is outlined in Exhibit 1-A of the CON application. It is a well-developed vision for delivering clinically appropriate, high-quality, affordable, and financially sustainable health care to residents and visitors of Lincoln County. It is intended to pass along significant cost savings to the community, and the board is investing substantial capital and operating funding in the Booth Bay community to realize this vision.
How might compliance with condition number 3 burden the achievement of the vision?
To explain this, I need to first describe our current situation. Lincoln County Healthcare has implemented $7.2 million in price reductions over a 12-month period beginning in October of 2013. These price reductions mean, for example, that a patient who receives a lipid panel test from the lab will pay $79 less for that test. A back x-ray is now $109 less, and a colonoscopy is now a little more than $500 less. To make up for the increased expenses associated with an expansion of the urgent care center to a 24/7 operating mode, the losses will have to be addressed by other changes, including likely cost shifting or possibly postponing other important initiatives. Money spent to underwrite losses in one service cannot be spent again someplace else.
Are there other aspects of the plan that are threatened by condition number 3?
Yes, over and above the price reductions, Lincoln County Healthcare has been investing and had been planning further investments in new models of care delivery designed to improve ambulatory care across the county, including the Booth Bay community. Our current estimate is that it will require a $900,000 investment over a 3-year period to move our primary care physician practices to the patient-centered medical home model. The patient-centered medical home model is a model of care that is being adopted across the country that is proving to build upon a foundational relationship between patient and provider and improve that care by bringing the support services necessary to complement that care. We are also expanding the Wound Care Center through a partnership with Healogics, a national leader in the care of patients with wound care needs. The approach our doctors and nurses have learned from our partner is focused on the care of complex wounds. Since opening in February 2014, the Wound Care Center's volume has grown steadily each month.
At the CON hearing in December 2014, there were comments about the expansion of services at the St. Andrews campus in Booth Bay. Are there initiatives along these lines that are threatened by losses that would be incurred if the urgent care center sustained incremental losses by moving to a 24/7 schedule?
Yes. The Board of Trustees of Lincoln County Healthcare has authorized investments to renovate the wellness and rehabilitation services facilities on the St. Andrews campus at a capital cost of $433,000. These renovations to physical, occupational, and speech therapy services are meant to ensure that our patients are cared for in an accessible, modern environment that promotes healing and independence. If required to operate the urgent care center on a 24/7 basis, future investments like this one will be much more difficult to accomplish for lack of funds.
Are long-term care skilled nursing beds also part of the planning at risk?
Yes. Lincoln County Healthcare has already duly licensed the 30 beds in the Gregory Wing at St. Andrews Village to care for both skilled nursing patients and long-term care residents, and has supplemented the staffing required to care for this population. It is worth mentioning that this is exactly the type of service expansion that we recognize is needed and was voiced by the community during the CON public hearing held last December. In addition, as the comments last December reflected, there is a need for additional skilled beds. We have filed a letter of intent to add 12 additional skilled beds to the Gregory Wing. We project the capital cost for this 12-bed expansion to the Gregory Wing will exceed $2.5 million. The losses we will incur operating a 24-hour urgent care center makes this expansion a much tougher proposition. As community leaders, our board would much rather invest in skilled care beds than to invest in a service with extremely limited benefit that will force us to lose money that could be better invested in what the community needs.
Are you saying that all of these projects will come to a halt if condition number 3 remains part of the CON in this matter?
I am saying that each one of the initiatives that I have mentioned above is at risk. The board has not finally decided what plan or mix of plans will have to be cut or phased down or sub-optimized. I am saying that we cannot proceed ahead as we had planned if we are required to incur losses by maintaining a 24/7 urgent care facility.
Does this complete your pre-filed testimony as of August 1, 2014?
Yes, with the understanding that I may have the opportunity to respond to points that may be raised for the first time in pre-filed testimony by others on August 7th or at the hearing by others.
Tender the witness for cross-examination.
Thank you.
Good morning, Jeff.
Hi, Linda.
How long have you been on the board?
I was on the board of St. Andrew's Hospital starting in 1996, I believe. And then they gave me a year off. And when St. Andrews and Miles joined together to form Lincoln County Healthcare, I was invited back to the board. I believe that was in 2007.
Okay. Do those two different boards function in basically the same way?
I think so, yes.
Are they advisory boards only, or do they actually have power over policy and who gets hired, who gets fired?
We're definitely not an advisory board. The main function of a board in governance of a nonprofit like this is twofold in my mind. One is to assure the highest quality in the care we deliver, and the second is to set the budget for management, which gives them the ability to spend money during the coming year. So that through the budgetary process, we set the priorities for management to carry out.
And when you work on the budget, you get your numbers from,
The finance department,
did the board hire the CEO of Lincoln County Healthcare?
yes.
So the Board of Trustees hired Mr. Donovan, not Maine Health.
True.
Who decides whether or not Lincoln Health will provide 24-hour urgent care services? The board, or does that require Maine Health approval?
You mean if the commissioner says we get to decide instead of having to do it?
Regardless of the commissioner, can the board make that choice?
The
Object,
board,
regardless of the commissioner, signals a question that has nothing to do with what we're doing here.
Sustained.
So if the commissioner says in the letter that you need to provide 24-hour service, does the board go along with that, or is it Maine Health that challenges it? Whose decision is it to bring this procedure today?
the board
board?
objected to the decision and asked the commissioner to reconsider.
How many people on the board?
20 or 21.
And was their position unanimous on that?
Irrelevant.
Sustained.
Can you tell me a little bit about the electronic medical records system?
Objection.
Very little bit.
Wait. Irrelevant.
Can you give me a little bit of foundation on why that question is relevant?
Is that possibly where a lot of your losses are coming from? In your overall financial picture?
Objection.
Sustained.
What is the board's vision of the relationship between urgent care and primary care?
Could you read that again? Huh?
What is the board's vision for the relationship between urgent care and primary care?
Relationship between, I can tell you that it's very much part of the board's vision to try to have every resident of Lincoln County have a relationship with a primary care physician. I think that the physicians that know better than I would tell you that would have an effect on urgent care. In other words, you might not need urgent care, you might not put off your care so much if you had a relationship. But beyond that, I'm not really the right person, I don't think, for the question.
But we're a tourist community. It's really not possible to get everybody in the area that might need urgent care to have a primary physician, is it?
I think that's probably true.
So there will probably be a lot of people that will never have that option. They'll need urgent care.
Yeah, I think that
And
makes
they may
sense to
need it
me.
at night.
It makes sense to me, but I think I'm probably speculating as much as you are.
So based on the numbers that the board reviewed, is the loss that you're anticipating for keeping the urgent care open at night the largest department losing money? Would that be?
Director relevance again?
Sustained.
Can you tell me how many other departments are losing money?
Same.
Sustained.
Well, if there are a lot of departments losing money, is it a possibility, in your opinion, that the urgent care center will have to close at some point, whether it's staffed 12 hours or 24 hours?
Same objection.
Sustained.
That's all I have.
Thank you.
Oh,
You direct?
no, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is a good time to take, we'll ask the parties, do you want to take the 30-minute lunch break now or wait? I'm going to need a short break in any event.
I think it's as good a time as any for lunch.
Okay, we will reconvene at 12:25 exactly.